All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Misty Rusk, and this is the San Diego Angel Conference for Entrepreneurs Track. We have a couple of great speakers for you tonight. To get us started, I'd like for you to put something in the chat for me. I would love to know what you'd like to get out of this tonight. So we're covering market opportunity and business model. And if you have some expectations, it'd be great if you could share them. Both of our presenters tonight are going to have a couple minutes. They can kind of quickly go through the chat and see if there's some specific things you really hope that you're going to get out of tonight, or anything, or any specific questions that you have related to market opportunity or business modeling for early seed stage angel investing. It's great to have you here. I've got a couple of introductory slides. I'm just going to run through them really quickly. First of all, there's no way we could offer a program like this if we didn't have sponsors that came in to underwrite it. We don't just willy-nilly go out and find sponsors, but we do take some time and care, and we try hard to develop good strategic partnerships with the sponsors that we work with. So all of the sponsors that you're going to see this year are going to be connected to us in ways that are meaningful to you as scalable startups. And I'd like to bring your attention to Nextwork. So they've come on as their title sponsor this year. They do outsourced platform development, websites, app development. We've got a team of 550 people that are available to do different kinds of software things. So would love it if you'd take a quick look at their website and some of the things that they have to offer, and keep them in mind if you have needs in their space. We also do this with a great number of partners. So you're going to see me say this every week. We've got a fantastic group of organizations in the San Diego metro region that work hard to support scalable startups like yours. And each of these organizations is identified both from the leadership level and also from the marketing level. They've got people identified that help us get the word out to all of their different constituents. So our weekly reach is somewhere in the neighborhood of 28,000 that we're reaching out to both entrepreneurs and also to investors to cultivate the innovation ecosystem in San Diego. So couldn't be more proud to get to work with a fantastic group of partners. And we wouldn't do this at all if we didn't have a fantastic host. So the University of San Diego really feels like it has a place to play in the innovation ecosystem. And the place we play is on the very practical side of getting things to market. So the students that we serve, the alumni that are connected to us, the programs that we offer that are community-based programs like this one, are set up with the idea that we can do great work in the world by working together, and that we can generate wealth, create new wealth at a grassroots level while we're doing good work to solve big problems that the world faces. So could not do this if it weren't for USD providing all of the staff support for this project. The institute in which I serve is called the Free Enterprise Institute, so FEI for short. It's brand new. They created it in the last year. It is now the home for the Brink SBDC, the San Diego Angel Conference, the Catalyzer, which is student-focused programs, and a few other things. And we have great programs. I'm not sure if Rhoda or Rachel are on the call tonight. I see Rhoda. I'm not sure if Rachel's here. Rhoda, do you want to say a quick hello or share anything that's happening over at the Brink? Okay, we'll come back to her. If she's got stuff, she might share it in the chat too. But it's a great program, and if you need support in working through any of these things, they've got a great team to help you be able to do that. Their services are free and confidential, again, through that partnership with USD and also through a cooperative agreement with the Small Business Administration that helps underwrite the cost of the services. I always go over this quick overview. We're in the week 3 of the E-Track. We're gonna cover 1 or 2 topics every week, all the way through the middle of December, with the exception of Thanksgiving week. On December 15th is the application deadline, which is then going to kick off the work that we're going to do with investors, and they're going to start looking at the deals and make the decisions about who they're going to move through to each of the next rounds before they make a final decision in March about the winner of the San Diego Angel Conference and whether or not they're going to be able to fund runners up. Just for the record, we're way ahead of schedule on investors for this stage. Now that we're in year 4, we can look back at what we were doing this week, last cycle. And this week, last cycle, we had 13 investors committed. This week, this cycle, we've got 23 investors committed. That's pretty exciting stuff for us. And I got to tell you, the applications are open. So I said last week, we're going to try and get this together for you. We thought we'd have it together soon. What I've got here is a screenshot of the website. So if you haven't been to the San Diego Angel Conference website, it's the sdangels.com. And if you can see up there, there's that big red arrow on the right. That's the apply tab, which takes you to this page that we're on. If you scroll down just a little bit, you're going to see, ta-da, the amazing Dr. Sylvia Ma, who is fund manager of Fund 1 and also presenter for tonight. And her giving the check to Oriana, I don't know why I can't say that tonight, Oriana Bretschker with Aquacycle, who won San Diego Angel Conference. There's a counter. So this counter is running down to the deadline. So we're 84 days to the application deadline. I took this screenshot about an hour ago. And then right underneath that, there's the apply button. So a couple of different ways you can get there. You can go on Gust and look for us. We're under San Diego, or we're under SDAC IV for Roman numeral 4. But the easiest is definitely to go to the website, and there's always lots of good stuff on the website. So click that apply button. Now, something important that I really want you to understand is you have not submitted your application to the San Diego Angel Conference Investor Group until you're asked to pay money. That is how you will know that you've hit the end of the line on the application process, because there's a lot of stuff that we're going to ask you for, because we're going to put down a couple $100,000, and it's important that we understand who you are and what you have to offer. So a couple of quick things on that. There's also an application fee. That application fee is $149. We don't want to make any mistake about that. So what you get for your $149 is you get to enter into the process. You get to get through at least the first round of reviews with the conference investors, who last year numbered about 65 by the time we got done. And we will do our best to get you at least a coffee meeting, even if you go out the first round. So one of the things that we're doing in this whole process is we're helping investors get their skills up. And one of the skills we want investors to have is the ability to give constructive feedback on a deal. So the best way to do that is to practice. We're going to do our best to get everybody at least a coffee meeting. In addition to that, for your $149 non-refundable fee, you get a ticket to the conference. So it's a pretty, like if you look around, we're pretty well priced. It's a pretty economical fee, but I also don't want to, there's not really any ways around this. So we don't waive the fee unless you win a pitch contest. We will waive the fee for that. But other than that, we're not going to waive the fee for anybody. So you should just know that there's a $149 obligation as part of the application process. And I have a couple of introductions. So I see Brian's on tonight. Brian Engelman and Sumner Webster are the fund co-managers for this year. And I dropped in here a picture that we took last week. We're missing Dr. Tammy Stevenson. She's on the call though. She's one of our fund co-managers and our fund administrator. I didn't have a picture of him up here, but this is the fund management team. These are the accredited investors who are making the decisions about how we're going to go forward this year and doing the necessary and tedious work of putting the conference together for you. So Brian, you have anything you want to share?
No, just welcome back to week number 3. I will tell you that Chris and Misty are the ones that do all of the heavy lifting. The fund management team that she mentioned, we kind of do the planning throughout the year, and it's the 50 or 60 investors that end up with SDAC that go through the hard process of deciding who moves forward and who doesn't. It's not easy on this end at all. Trust me on that. Really glad to see everybody again. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. Hopefully we'll see you again. It's a great way to interact with one another and meet some of the investors before we're starting to make our decisions. So have fun with it tonight.
It's a good night. I want to get right over to the speakers. I have one more person. I'd mentioned her last week. I know we've got some USD students on the call. Diana Hanash-Hag is on the call. So Diana, I don't know if you want to pop your video up. This is a surprise for you. I'm sorry. If you want to say hello, but for those of you who are USD students, Diana is in a new role. She's the student success manager. So I see she's turned her camera on. If you would like to share a little bit, that would be great. So this is a brand new position that is, Diana, I'll let you take it.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so I work with our graduate business students in the MBA program, Masters of Executive Leadership, Masters of Global Leadership, and all of our entrepreneurship students. So we do offer a concentration in entrepreneurship as well as a minor in entrepreneurship. So I work with them as their career coach. And this is one of the events that I've been promoting to all of our students that have the entrepreneurial spirit. So thank you for having us.
Thanks, Diana. And so if you're here because Diana suggested, that's great. And if you are here because you found us some other way, know that Diana is your person and that she can help you with figuring out a bunch of other resources. It's great that USD's gone that direction. So glad to have that extra set of resources. And I'd mentioned her late last week and wanted to say a little bit more again this week. With that, our first speaker tonight is Maggie Sailing. Maggie is the communications director for Startup NV. So Startup NV is an organization that helps Nevada startups scale their company. She'll probably tell you a little bit more. She's also the founder of Angel NV, which is the equivalent of the San Diego Angel Conference for the state of Nevada. They just finished their first cycle. Full disclosure, I was part of that process and helped them get that done. So, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but wanted to let you know that if you are a Nevada-based company and you are here and you haven't heard about Angel NV, their program kicks off in October. And if well, Maggie, you can tell us if this is right or not. They run a E-Tracks type series also. And they've got their own group of speakers. So a lot of these topics will be covered again for Nevada. And I think they'll allow you to participate. You can't apply for Angel NV unless you're a Nevada-based company, but I don't think that precludes you from getting involved with them, and then they can try and recruit you to Nevada, where, to be fair, running a business is easier. They don't make it nearly as hard in Nevada. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Maggie, who's going to take the market opportunity section of the event for the next about an hour. All right, Maggie, it's all yours.
Okay, hi. Thank you for having me. I am Maggie Sailing, the Chief of Staff for Startup NV, and we start our program called Angel NV on October 12th. And you can apply, but you won't be chosen if you're not a Nevada-based company. So we don't discriminate in that way, and we welcome everybody to participate in our education. Because you may want to hear it a second time, whatever the topic may be. We will have different speakers from the people that Misty has rustled up. So I'm here today to speak about TAM, SAM, and SOM. These are the numbers of markets. So what the hell is that? TAM is your total addressable market. It's the market of all the people in the whole world that could buy your product or service. SAM, the service addressable market, available market, is the subset of the TAM that's in your geographical area that could buy your product or service. So you're narrowing down where you're going to make your product or service available. And then some, yeah?
Hey, sorry, I think you've got slides, but we're not seeing your slides.
Oh, okay, you're right. Let me go back. I thought I was sharing, but
Now we've got your flowers. I'd love them. There, we've got it now.
okay. So this is the slide I'm on. The first slide was a lovely SDAC slide. And here's the second one. So we're just going over TAM, SAM, and SOM, what they are and why they're important to you. So TAM was the everybody in the world who could possibly buy your product or service. SAM, the service available market, is a subset of TAM. And it's getting into a more narrow market that you can focus on that's kind of more digestible. And then your serviceable obtainable market is really where you're going to target your market first. So it's a portion of the market that you think that you can realistically gain in a time period, 3 to 5 years. And on the left, you'll see a stacked Venn diagram. This is the easiest way to depict these 3 different numbers. So it's very easy for people to understand how they are subsets of one another utilizing this graphic. So why do we need to know how big the market is? And the reason, it's twofold. Investors want to know what the potential is. So here we have a shot of a bunch of famous and not as famous investors. And you can see that they all are interested in the market size or the market opportunity. And it's one of the first slides that they want to see. They need to understand what the potential is. And the second reason is that you need to understand what the potential is. Being a startup is not easy, especially if you're a scalable startup. So you need to understand whether your market is billions or millions. Because even if it's millions, you're going to be dedicating a ton of your time to this project. And we're talking years. So you're not always going to be able to go out on Halloween with the kids. You're going to be working at your other baby, the startup. So here's a little bit more information. We want to know these numbers in terms of dollars. So telling us the number of users is informational, but it doesn't get to the heart of what an investor is looking for. An investor wants to understand what the upside, what the 20 years looking forward could be. The service available market de-risks things for the investors because they know you can probably get to this number. You may not be able to get to TAM for a long time, but SAM is something that should be attainable over time. And then SOM shows that you have dedicated the time to realistically look at what you can achieve in a time-bound period. So this is really your sales projection for the next 3 to 5 years. How do you get to these numbers? Well, let me tell you, it's not easy. And it's something that a lot of founders, in my experience, don't dedicate the right amount of time to. It's something, as I said, that you should want to know. So you know whether you're going to have a Main Street business, something that will keep your family well fed, you'll be able to send your kids to college, but it's probably not something that an investor may get involved in, and certainly not venture capitalists. Just knowing where your roadmap takes you it can give you peace of mind. So finding the information, there are some very public resources that you can tap into. The UN has all sorts of market data. So does the CIA World Factbook and the World Bank. So starting with these big numbers, you would be creating your SAM and your SOM to get to smaller amounts of money that could be realistic, but it's a lot of guesswork at that point. Bottom up, here you're going to start with your first market, and you might do a comparison of people that are in the same industry with you. So if you're going to start a fast food market, you can fairly easily find out who your competitors are, what type of fast food industry they have. So you could start with, say, US fast food as your TAM, your local area, say Southern California or Las Vegas, to find out what the sales projections are for that particular field for what's been recorded. And then to figure out what you're doing, you can actually, with certain databases like BizMiner, you can find out where in the neighborhoods in your area, depending on how big it is, what they are reporting as having made in a certain time period. So here you're building a very localized research. And so using the bottom up process is the best process. That's one that investors like the most, but you can also undershoot. You can, just not be thinking quite large enough. And then a third way of doing it is with external research. And this is not something that a lot of startups can afford. This is what major companies would do, commission research. If they wanted to bring in a new product line, or say they were considering buying a company, then they might hire Forrester or Gartner to do an industry analysis to try to get an idea of what the upside potential is in that particular field. So we're going to look at a few examples. These are well-known examples. Uber. This is from their original pitch deck. TAM right now, transportation worldwide, is 5.7 trillion. And that includes all sorts of information. That's rail freight, air freight, shipping containers. It's every kind of transportation that's possible. It will soon include SpaceX, let's send stuff to the moon. SAM for them was taxi and limousine. So Uber actually started as a 10-car service in the city of San Francisco. And their plan was to take this and go to the 5 largest cities in the US. So New York was going to be second. And so they created their TAM, SAM, and SOM based on a best case, a realistic case, and a worst case. So the best case would be, they would be the market leader in their industry, and they would be able to grow to $1 billion. Their realistic case was only 5% of the SAM, and that would get them to, well, whatever figure that is, 5% of 4.2 billion. Their worst case was that they would just stay as a 10-car service and have 100 clients in San Francisco. So Uber's revenue in 2019, we all know what happened. In 2019, it was 14.15 billion. And their current valuation, which was actually probably a year ago, 72 billion. But in that time, now this is 2007 to last year was about 2020, it's a good long time. And in that period of time, they increased their reach. So their SOM increased because their SAM increased. They went for delivering food, delivering freight, mobility. They have some scooters and things, and UberX. So they went into different fields so that they could increase their SOM. Here is an Airbnb example. So Airbnb started as a couple of guys in San Francisco who had an air mattress that they figured they could rent out to convention goers. And so for them to look at their market, they looked at the number of trips. So I told you it needs to be in money, but this is where they started. They knew that there were 1.9 billion trips,